Good morning. Thanks for joining us. This is going to be a session that's kind of over after you've been awarded the contract and then the next steps once you do have that contract with the state. My name is Mary Swartz, and I'm the purchasing director over at DOA. We at DOA act as the business officer for all of the other state agencies within state government. So we provide a lot of services to all of our other state agencies, but we also give services to our underutilized businesses and our underutilized communities as far as our advocacy groups. So under DOA, we're a very diverse group of departments and divisions that are working together to ensure that the people of North Carolina get all of the services that they need. So if you look at this group of different divisions that fall under DOA, Carla said, if you have any questions during this session, you can put that in the chat. The hub office is there to help me answer those as we go along. I will stop and have breaks throughout. But if you look at the different divisions that DOA supports, we've got the advocacy groups as far as the hub office, Indian Affairs, non-public ed, and women and youth survivors group. So with that is the hub office. And because of that, because hub is one of our divisions at DOA, I do work directly a lot with our hub office to make sure that we're doing our best efforts for inclusion and these efforts on teaching our hub vendors how to do business with the state. I think is very important so that we get great proposals and that you know how the process works in state procurement. With that said, if you haven't already taken the Purchasing 101 course that the hub office teaches, I believe it's every month, if not at least every other month, DOT and myself, we kind of split those duties of teaching that course. There are recorded sessions on the hub office's website. We go in depth on how to bid and how to go through the entire bidding process. So this course is going to cover more on the back end once you do have a contract. If you haven't already taken that other course, I suggest you do. Like Carla said, today's session will be recorded and we will be passing out this. You will get a copy of this presentation for your records. So along with our advocacy groups at DOA, we also have asset management. We have facility management that manages all the buildings in the downtown complex. So all of the building maintenance on all of our buildings, we put those bids out. We do have state construction underneath DOA. However, state construction has its own sets of rules of how they bid state construction projects. So if you, like Alicia said, the state construction conference is on March 5th, and then after that conference is when they're having that event. So you should get a lot of information on the construction side of the house during that event after hours. So I suggest you attend that if you can. We have state parking. We manage all the parking decks in the downtown complex, and state property that manages all the leased and owned property that the state owns. As far as services, like I said, we are the service provider to a lot of our state agencies and universities and community colleges. So we have the mail service center that handles all of our courier mail, all of our outgoing notices. We have Motor Fleet that manages the entire fleet of vehicles for the state. We have statewide purchase and contract. You're going to hear me talk a little bit about them. They are the statewide governing authority on how those state tax dollars are spent. So they write the rules and the processes and procedures on how we buy. They are a division of DOA, so we work closely with them as well to ensure that our processes for all state agencies is kind of consistent across the board. We have federal and state surplus property, which actually as a new business, or actually anybody within the state, we have a warehouse that's over off of Chapel Hill Road where we sell the state's used equipment, including vehicles, computers, office supplies, desks, chairs, filing cabinets, anything you can think of, and it's open to the public. So you can always go over to state and federal surplus property and purchase things that you need if you're setting up an office. Then the additional departments we have the residential schools, which includes Governor Moorhead School of the Blind. We have the 2 schools of the deaf. There's one out east and one out west. So we manage their large-scale procurements and post those opportunities for them. We have Office of State Human Resources. We post their bids as well, Lieutenant Governor, and Military and Veteran Affairs. So if you look at all of the different divisions that we manage and do procurement for, we have a large array of different types of purchases that we make. And most state agencies operate that way. Everybody's got to buy office supplies. Everybody's got to do certain things for building maintenance. So there is lots of opportunity around the world within state government, including all of our universities, community colleges, and we all post in the same place, which is EVP, which is our electronic vendor portal. So make sure that you're registered to do business with the state through that portal. If you are a certified hub vendor, your first step was to register an EVP. So that's where you get notices of opportunities to do business with the state. So we're going to talk about today in this course is really, like I said, the back end. So I've been awarded a contract with the state. Now what? We're going to go through the award process, where to find your who was awarded. Maybe you weren't the awarded vendor, but you can be able to see the tabulations of what everybody bid, and then who was the actual awarded vendor. We're going to talk about contract formation and what are the documents that make up the contract. We're going to talk about how you should set up a kickoff meeting and what needs to be discussed during that kickoff meeting, some contract management throughout the life of the contract, and then performance, what you're graded on and how to perform the tasks that are under that contract, where to know how you are scored, how you are, what you're held liable to in the contract. Then we're going to get you paid on the back end. We're going to talk about how to submit invoices, where to submit those, and how that works. And then in the back end, at the end of a contract, just some things to think about for contract closeout. So first happens, you've gone through that whole rigmarole of submitting a bid, going through the bid process, asking the questions and answers during the question and answer period. It could be just a small purchase where you're just sending a quote. It could be a large formal bid where you submit a proposal. Whatever the process is, the state will notify the awarded vendor that they are awarded. Through that, once all the approvals have been made, know that based on the dollar amount and what we're actually buying, it has different levels of approvals it has to go through. We do discuss all of those different nuances through the Purchasing 101 course of all those approvals and where it goes and who does what. But once those approvals are achieved, the awarded vendor will be notified by the purchasing agency that they have been awarded the contract. The award is also posted out on EVP, and that usually happens within 3 days of the actual approval to award. So we post that out on EVP for the world to see for formal bids, who was awarded. With that said, those awards stay out there indefinitely. If you know of a project that you bid on, or you can search by department on that website and see what the award was, what the tabulations are. So we usually update at the time of award the tabulations of what each vendor bid. And so all that information is posted out on EVP and stays out there indefinitely. The event, if this was proposed by, if you had to submit your bid through the Ariba sourcing tool, which most of our state agencies are using, it is closed once the award is received. So the event is closed, and like I said, the notification goes out to the vendor, the awarded vendor, that they are awarded. Not necessarily does the award posting go out to all bidders, so make sure that you're checking EVP to see if an award has been made. The awarded vendor will then receive a copy of the fully executed contract if there was an actual contract that was signed and executed. So what does make up that contract? So with that, the fully executed solicitation document. So the document that was either posted out on EVP that you responded to, or if you were sent directly, if it's a smaller purchase, you could have been sent an RFQ, which is a request for quote document. But that's the actual solicitation document that was issued to vendors either publicly or via email, where it states what we're requesting to buy. So that information that's in there, along with the scope of work and then your pricing that you've submitted, all becomes, it is fully executed by both parties and becomes the main focal point, the meat of your contract. The North Carolina terms and conditions are included. So just know that by signing that solicitation document, you are agreeing to the North Carolina terms and conditions. Any addendums that were posted during a bid process, so your question and answer period, all those questions were answered on an addendum, that becomes part of the contract. Any addendums that changed maybe the scope when it was originally posted, that all becomes part of the final contract. What you submit back during a proposal process. So if we asked for your technical approach of how you're going to approach the project, your proposal with that information, you would be held liable to as well in that contract. And so that becomes part of the contract. We do, in the back end of the evaluation period, we could have had asked for negotiations. We could have negotiated pricing, or maybe we only had enough funding for a certain amount of the project, so we asked for a reduced scope, or if we asked for there was something unclear, any requests for final offers, which are BAFOs, or requests for clarification, where the vendor had to clarify something in its original proposal, those all become part of the contract. Like I said, the vendor is notified once award. That's usually done on a certification of award memo that just has the very basics of this vendor has been awarded this contract, here is the dates of this contract, and here is the amounts of those contracts. Some type of memo, a certification of award, is included in the contract document. Throughout the life of the contract, things can happen. Things can change, and so we may have amendments to the contract. All amendments are included as part of the contract document. The contract term could have had optional renewals that were up for the state to opt to renew. So anytime we renew, we send an amendment or an agreement to sign by both parties that says, yes, we are exercising that renewal. So that would. And then any purchase orders that are attached to that contract. So all of these different documents become part of your contract. It's very important that not only you start a contract file, but we are starting a contract file, because if it's not written down, it didn't happen in the procurement world. So we want to make sure that you know what all can be used in the contract management piece of that contract. Could include any references to any of these documents. So we talk about fully executing the contract. Only state authorized individuals can sign contracts. So each agency probably has a signature authority policy of who can actually sign. That's why it might take a minute to exercise and actually get those contracts finally signed off on it, because it has to go through some internal approvals. But every state agency has that policy, and it outlines who can sign, what they can sign, and what those delegation amounts are. So some people can only sign up to 100,000, some people can sign up to 1 million. It would just depend on that particular agency. And when we execute the contract, there are 2 spots where we would have to sign off that actually executes the contract. The first is on that solicitation document where it says for state use only. That's where when we countersign that, you've already signed that when you submitted your proposal. But when we countersign that on the back end, that executes that contract. So that's in the state use only. It's not only in the solicitation document, but it's also in any of the BAFOs or requests for clarifications that we sent along the way. So purchase orders. Most of our state agencies, universities, and community colleges all use the e-procurement system. It is our complete digital system that manages the actual buying process for the state. So it includes a link to EBP where the vendors register, and it includes a back end that hits our accounting system, which is NCFS. So within e-procurement, when we issue a purchase order in association with any contract, it allows us to add additional information to that purchase order. It does get sent to however you're registered in EBP. There is a checkbox that you want to make sure is checked that you want to do business electronically and that you agree to getting purchase orders through e-procurement. And it asks for who gets those purchase orders. So it will come to however the vendor is registered to the email address that you've designated to receive e-procurement purchase orders. On that purchase order, some things to just be on the lookout. It should include the description of the items or services that are being conducted. It could have the bid number or the contract number, any accounting codes that it's associated to, pricing, delivery schedule, payment terms, effective dates of the contract. Normally, when at DOA, when we issue a purchase order that has a contract term of 1 year with 2 optional renewals, we often cut a new PO in association with exercising that renewal. And that's so that if there is a reason why we wouldn't exercise, we wouldn't have already encumbered that money. So often you will get a new PO for every year of the actual contract. It could include transportation and freight. Just be mindful anytime that you are submitting quotes or bid documents, if there is transportation, shipping, freight costs, make sure that you make that a separate line item because freight and shipping is a service, not a good, but the good is charged the 1.75 fee for e-procurement. And we go over all of that in that Procurement 101 course. So it could have a separate line item for your transportation and freight. And then any additional terms and conditions, we do have a spot where we can add comments to vendors. So be on the lookout for the comments section because it could have information, you know, if you just gave us a quote to ship us 7,000 batteries, you know, car batteries, and we don't have a loading dock, there could be information about that. So just make sure and look on your purchase order for any comments to vendor. And it should also include, by that point, if it doesn't include it on the certification of award of the actual contract, it may be on your purchase order who at the division level, now the guy that turns the wrench that you're doing services on his boiler, it should have all of his contact information to be able to contact him directly and schedule those services. I'm going to stop there for a minute. Do we have any questions?
I think our questions have been answered in the chat. And so if we have anyone that wants to raise their hand and get a question answered, oh, and that's not me. So, all right. Tricole.
We got, yeah, Tricole. Do you want to take yourself off mute? You can.
Yes. How you doing this morning?
Good.
So the question that I have two. I'm just going to answer one right now. So my son's about the signatures. I have 2 older sons that I have down as managers. So if I'm not available, will they still be able to sign or no?
Yes. So as far as who can sign on the vendor side, as long as the individual is authorized by your company to provide the services within at the cost within, and you allow them to sign, that's on you. Just know that whoever's signing the contract or signing the solicitation document is when you're actually signing. Just that person is then obligated to provide. They are obligating your company to provide those services or goods within at the prices that are quoted within. So if you give them authorization to do that, that's fine.
I do apologize. And one more question for now.
Mhm.
So when it comes to the meeting, I mean, when it comes to being awarded, will there be a meeting prior to the signatures being signed?
So
Would
we're
there be
going
a
to
meeting
get into
prior?
that. Yeah, we're going to get
Okay,
into that, having a kickoff meeting. Yep.
okay, thank you.
Mhm. Anything else?
That's
All
I don't
right.
it.
see any other hands raised. I think we can proceed.
All right. So we're going to talk about the setting up a contract kickoff meeting. So after you've been awarded, now you've gotten your certification of award, and you should have the information for the actual contract manager at the division level that's going to work or receive those goods and services from you. So it's always a good idea if they haven't reached out, that you reach out, set up a kickoff meeting. It takes a lot of effort on both parties to get a contract up and running. You've gone through potentially an extensive bidding and evaluation process to get that contract. You want to make sure that you're all on the same page. So, like I said, having that kickoff meeting where you identify roles and responsibilities. Maybe you had a salesperson that went through the site visit to see that through the bid process, submitted the proposal, and now you have actual technicians that are going to be working on the project. And maybe somebody else needs to receive the invoices, and maybe somebody else needs to process the payment. So just bringing all of those players together is a good idea on the front end, and really assign then those roles and responsibilities, give contact information for each member so that everybody's on the same page to kick it off. Clarify any terms and conditions, delivery dates, things that are potentially that you didn't understand in the scope. Make sure that it's very clear what you're being held responsible to do. Are there any additional steps that you have to start? Do you have to go through background checks, or do you have to be badged to get in our buildings? Do you have to order supplies? Do you have to do all of that to make sure that your timelines are all very clear? So that's good to establish those goals and those objectives during that kickoff meeting, and just make sure that everybody's understanding what's going to happen. Just know that during the bid process, if there are supplies, do not order supplies. You're not guaranteed to be awarded that contract, but at the time that you get actually awarded, that's when you're ordering those supplies for that particular project. So we talk about what was in that contract. The solicitation document should have included some type of scope of work or specifications. Usually scope of work is identified for services, specifications are identified for goods. But you need to know what you are required in that scope of work or specifications. That is where your performance will be evaluated on how you meet those specifications or that scope of a work. So be very mindful of what's in that, what you are obligating your company to, and that if there were any questions when this was originally posted, make sure you use that question and answer period to your advantage to know exactly what you're going to be asked of if there's anything that's unclear. And then complete any of those pre-award things. Pre-effective date, really, requirements. So if you do have those background checks that have to happen before you actively start the work, or if you have to be badged, if you have to provide manuals for some kind of equipment, if you have to get user access to systems that the state has, if you have to secure the required staffing, make sure that you build all of that into your timeline when you're setting up your scope of work, or your technical approach to a project, or just in your own when it talks about delivery timelines, that you include those things into your timeline. And then once you do have completed some of those tasks, make sure that you're confirming the deliverables, that if there are any reporting requirements, that you meet those deadlines and those delivery times and instructions, and then complete each one of those tasks. Each contract is set up different on how you get paid. It could be based on meeting a delivery. It could be based on a monthly charge. It could be based on completion of each task. So just know that that's a question that you may want to ask during the kickoff meeting. It may need to ask during the solicitation phase if that's unclear of when you can submit invoices. Know that the state pays net 30. We do not pay until services are rendered, or items are received. So just be aware of that when you are bidding with the state. We are in net 30, and that's net 30 from the time of an invoice approval. And we'll get a little more into that. We're going to talk about contract management. So throughout the life scale, once you get awarded the contract, it doesn't stop there. Now you're working with the contract manager to ensure that all those deliverables are met, to make sure that you have everything documented appropriately and that you meet all of those different tasks and processes and procedures, whatever they are for that particular project. So it's always a good idea to set up some way to monitor that. So once you do have the contract of award, we suggest that you set up an actual internal contract management plan so that after you have your kickoff meeting, you can identify the roles and responsibilities, get all those contact information down into your system, create a client profile for us, knowing that we're net 30, where to submit your invoices, how all of that is going to work. Do you submit those monthly? Do you submit them at the time, so that you know how that contract is going to work? Document the start and end dates of your contract. So know that if it started in January and on January 1, it's going to end. It's only a year. It's going to end December 1. So you'll have to do some closeout activities at December 1. Do you have those optional renewals? We try to reach out at least 30 days before that expiration of the first term to option that. If you haven't heard anything, you should know that your contract's ending December 31st. Perhaps reach out to your contract manager and say, hey, are y'all renewing? We're coming up on that. Make sure you know your dates of your contract. Make checklists of those deliverables. So if you have things that you have to complete during the life of that contract, it's always a good idea just to make a checklist. And know that any contract that's between the state and a vendor is between the state and the prime vendor that submitted the solicitation and signed the contract. We do not get involved in the relationship between a subcontractor and the prime vendor. So with that being said, make sure that you define those relationships. And if you are a subcontractor, it behooves you to write a contract between you and the prime as far as to what they're liable for. If something is not happening that a subcontractor was responsible for on that contract, we're not coming after the subcontractor for that performance. We're coming after the prime, because you signed the contract. You are obligated to then complete those tasks however you choose to complete them. So make sure that you might want to be able to hold a subcontractor's feet to the fire, and a subcontractor might want to cover themselves with the prime. We do not get involved in paying a subcontractor or anything like that. So it behooves you both to make sure that you have your own contract or agreement between the two parties. Make sure that throughout the life of the contract that you notify your contract manager or the administrator for that contract of any issues. If you have changes in scope or that you have changes in staff, just make sure that you let us know, because we might have to go get them badged to get the building access. There are certain things that have to happen. There may be within the contract that might be defined that you have 24 hours to let us know if staff change or whatnot. So make sure that you know what's in that contract, what you're obligated to, and then notify your contract manager. Like I said, if we kick it off and you work together, great. Usually these contracts go smoothly. Just be in communication throughout the life of the contract so you can make sure that it's working out for both parties. And then monitor and document progress throughout the life of the project. You can guarantee that our staff will be monitoring throughout the life of the contract. So if there is an issue, we're able to depend on that documentation. You should be doing the same. So if you have an issue, document it. Make sure that you're keeping up with emails. You're keeping all that communication between you and the contract manager, between you and procurement, between you and anybody with the state, to make sure that you have it on file for your own records. So what needs to be in the actual administration file? So we talked about your contract documents as far as what makes up your contract. But as far as that personnel file or that client file, you probably should include, one, all of the contract documents that we discussed, but also if you had a contract management plan that included those checklists and things like that, and the contact information and those things that have to be done, any reports, any of the email communications back and forth, shipping documents, your invoices that you submit, receipts and billing documents, any performance reviews or inspection and testing results that you get from us, contract modification documentation. So maybe we asked you to do the landscape, but we didn't ask you to do the ants. We have an ant problem out in the landscape, and so that was not part of the original contract, but now you've been asked to take care of the ants. You need to provide a quote for that. We need to amend the actual contract to add the monies to it, to add that scope of work to it. So all of that amendment process, including your quote, and then the signed amendment that added it to it, the new purchase order where we added the money to it, all of that documentation to change the contract for whatever it is. It's also a good idea to keep that list of state furnished property, because at contract closeout, you will be expected to give all that back. So if we give you badges, if we give you access to our systems, if we give you a desk, a computer, whatever it is, make sure that you have a list of what is state-owned property so that at the end of the contract, you know what has to come back to us and where it is and who has it and things like that. So like I said, lots of times things change during the life of a contract. Renewals, the state, an agency can award up to 3 years on a contract. If we go beyond that 3 years, we will have had to get approval to go beyond that. So you may see 3 years with 2 optional renewals, which makes a 5-year contract. That means that we've gotten that approval to go beyond 3 years, but on the standard, most of our contracts that are ongoing services start out at a 3-year contract. Optional renewals are built into that initial term. So it could be a 1-year contract with 2 optional renewals. It could be a 2-year initial term with 1-year optional renewals. But whatever that term is, it will be in that solicitation document up front. And then those renewals are at the sole discretion of the state to use. So we decide, do we want to use that optional renewal? It could be multitude of reasons of why we do not. There could be no money. There could be that the scope is changing. It could be that we've had some performance issues. We need to go back out for bid. There could be multiple things and reasons as to why we do not exercise a renewal. But if we do, we draft either an amendment or an agreement, and we send it to the vendor before expiration of the contract to execute by both parties. And like I said, most of the time you might get a new purchase order when we exercise that new renewal. So make sure on your invoicing that you are attaching the correct purchase order based on the year of service. So if it is into 2nd year of service, that you change on your invoice to that next year's purchase order. That helps with accounting to be able to make sure you're being paid off the correct purchase order. Amendments are used to change anything. during the life of a contract. So there could be rate changes. We could have gone past that 3 years and all of our renewals, and now we need to extend to finish whatever it is that we're doing. So it could be an extension. It could change the scope. Like I said, we needed to add the ants on to the contract. So we're going to do that and add those additional services. We might come to you and say, okay, well, tell me how much it's going to be to add that ant treatment twice a year. And then give me that scope. We will have to go to potentially, if this is a contract, it has to go through those approvals. The amendment has to go through those approvals. So amendments can take a few minutes to get done, few days, few weeks, few months to get done, depending on their complexity, to get those approvals. Just know that only the purchasing office can change the terms of a contract. So if your landscape guy comes up to you and says, sure, just add on those ants and we'll take care of it, you'd be like, no. If it's not written down, I potentially don't get paid for it. So we need to amend the contract to ensure that that amendment is executed by both parties. It went through the approvals. You got your PO updated, all of those steps to ensure that you get paid for any of those changes. I'm going to stop there. Any questions?
We did have a few questions in the chat that it looks like they were answered, and I'm just making sure. Yes, they were answered. And so if anyone wants to raise your hand to get a question answered. Any further questions?
All right, we'll keep on with keeping on.
Maybe.
All right, so now we're going to get into contract performance and kind of show you how that works, some different things within the solicitation, within that contract that you would be held liable to and to be on the lookout for. So know that we don't consider anything delivered if it is a piece of equipment that has to be installed. Delivery is not complete until it is actually installed, up and running. That could include some testing on that piece of equipment. So just make sure that if there is a testing to make sure that the equipment is working properly, that you complete that and then submit your invoice. Know that if there are inspections for services, that all invoices will not be paid until the agency has approved the scope of work, that invoice approval. If there was a report that had to come back with it, all of that has to be done before the invoice is paid. Specifications may include the testing requirements. They should have been written into that scope up front. Sometimes the inspections on what we plan to inspect is included in the solicitation document. If there's questions as to what you will be, when you will be inspected, how you will be inspected, ask those during the question answer period. But what we're really looking for, inspections, and testing, we are looking for, does that service, does that piece of equipment, does it meet those specifications as they're written in the contract? Did you complete that scope of work as it was written in the contract? You will only be held liable for what is written in the actual contract. As far as performance is based, we would call you out that potentially you did not meet this deliverable, did not meet that timeline. And it could not only be what is in the solicitation document, but it could potentially also be what was in your proposal. So if your proposal concluded a timeline, it's very important that you meet the timeline that you submitted, because that's now part of the contract that we've all agreed upon. Those services are inspected by the contract manager or the administrator at the actual division level. And just know that, like I said, one of our things is that we have to sign off on the invoice that everything is completed, and that if it's a piece of equipment, it's up and running, it's good to go, or that the inspection has happened and the goods are accepted. So like I said before, we are the document people at purchasing. We make sure that everything's written down so that everybody's on the same page. So we do document via email. We do document via the solicitation documents. We document via those performance things. Everything should be written down in some sort of writing, whether it be digitally or handwritten, to document the performance and the pieces of the contract. So the state will notify you of anything that is damaged or inaccurate. We do have the ability to document that within e-procurement. So if it is something that you just provided a quote for and it came to us and it doesn't work, we could reject that or say that it's on back order or whatnot. All of that can be tracked through e-procurement. You need to notify us of anything that potentially is going to be late shipped, is back ordered, discontinued, inability to meet some contract requirement. If you notify us, we are then able to remedy that problem to make sure that we keep that good working relationship, that it's not just lost in space and we don't know what's happening with it. So make sure that communication is good between you and your contract manager and between you and procurement if there's any questions on a particular contract. And like I said, if they're requesting those change orders, make sure that you provide a quote so that we know how much money needs to be added to the contract that's in association with any amendments. So if we needed to add the ants, make sure that you provide a quote for that. We'll go through the process, and then we would actually both sign a formal amendment amending that contract. And then document all communications for references. If you have that contract file, keep emails between you and the contract manager, especially if they have to do with performance, so that you have them on file where you say, I've completed that. You've documented when you completed whatever the request was, or that you documented performance on your staff, document those types of things as well. If you ever do get a vendor complaint, so if you have the contract manager is your first point of access to the state after the contract is written. So work with them. If they have a problem, please try to fix it. Like I said, it's taken a long way to get through the bid process and get to the contract process. So we want to make sure that both parties are getting what they need as far as payment, as far as completing of services or goods. And then if there is a problem, your contract manager could reach out via email or via phone and try to fix those issues up front. If they get to the point where they can't fix it, they may reach out to their purchasing office. So like I said, when it comes to performance, you're held liable for what is in that scope of work or any amendments that have changed that scope of work. And that is the number one term and condition of the North Carolina State Terms and Conditions. The vendor will be given the opportunity to fix the problem first. So we do ask our contract managers, did you notify them in writing? Did you notify them over the phone? Did you give them the opportunity to fix the problem? And then if so, if the problem persists, they can come to the purchasing office where we could issue a formal vendor complaint. Just notice that if you ever get a formal vendor complaint from a procurement office, it is a big deal. At that point, you've been notified in writing, verbally by the agency, and they are still having problems. In that formal vendor warning, it will call out to where you are in breach of contract. It will cite the contract because that's what you're liable for. And it does have deadlines. It has a deadline to respond to that formal vendor complaint. And then it also has a deadline to fix the problem. So we do give you an additional time to fix the problem. But first, at least respond that you got that complaint and you work for it. You could ask for a meeting. You could provide a rebuttal to that complaint. But that is the door that opens, and you do have to respond if you ever get a formal vendor complaint. Based on that formal vendor complaint and that you're in breach of contract, just know that it will be held in that procurement file through the life of that contract. And it could potentially result in you losing a contract. It could potentially result in a termination of the contract based on whatever that particular issue is, but all of that information is within that formal vendor complaint. Other things that we could say is that we're going to hold payment until those remedies are met or potentially terminate. So we have, within the terms and conditions with the state of North Carolina, we have two different reasons why things would be terminated. There is termination for cause. That's where the vendor has been given that notice with effective date per the terms and conditions of the contract, that you were found in breach of contract. And then we have termination for convenience. So that is also found within the terms and conditions of the contract. You were given a notice as to the end date of the contract, where to send your final invoices. Could be for things like our building is getting ready to go under construction, and so we no longer need the janitorial services. We're giving you the 30, 60 days notice or whatever that the building is going to be closed. Therefore, we're terminating this contract based on that. So, or it could be that we don't have any more funding. We ran out of money. There could be multiple reasons as to why we need to terminate for convenience. At the time of termination, either way, return all that state issued equipment, access badges, pull out of the user accounts that you have on our systems. That's why it's so important that you know where those equipment and access points are throughout the life of the contract. Follow any final billing instructions and any performance guarantees. If this was based on cause, just know that if there was a performance guarantee, it could be withheld if you're found in that breach of contract. So that is the point of that performance guarantee, is to ensure that the state is receiving good performance. Any questions there?
No questions in the chat, but we have a hand raised.
Right.
If you want to unmute, Civility.
Hello, good morning. My question is about insurance. Are you able to speak to insurance requirements from the state? Does the state have kind of standard requirements across all contracts, or is it really a project by project basis?
So both. There are standard insurance requirements in the state's general terms and conditions, and it's based off of how much the estimated value of that contract is. So all of that is listed in the state's standard terms and conditions, as far as if a contract is considered a small purchase, or if it's up to $1 million or over $1 million. There's different levels of insurance that are required. And the state standard terms and conditions, you can find those on the DOA statewide PNC website. Carla, if you'll throw DOA's website in the chat, that'd be great. On that, you'll go to vendor forms, and one of the first forms is the state's terms and conditions. However, with that said, an individual project could ask for additional insurance requirements, so that are outside of the standards. So there could be, and if that is a requirement, it's listed up front in the solicitation document as to what exceeds what the standard is.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
All right. Keep on with the keeping on. All right. So we're going to get you paid. We're going to talk about the payment process for us that use NCFS and e-procurement, and some things to think about on your invoicing, and how that Net 30 works and all of that. So costs are billed by the vendor must be in accordance with the contract payment terms and match your purchase order. So if it is a reoccurring monthly cost, you will get on your purchase order. You may see multiple lines on that purchase order based on the fiscal year that it's in. That's so that we're encumbering the money under the correct fiscal year for us, which ends June 30 of every year. So you may see a line that's January to June 30, and then July 1 through December 31st. And so you may see a year's worth of service broken up into two lines. But it would be on that same purchase order. And it's associated to, if you had a contract that was broken up by deliverables, you may see your lines broken up by completion of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, however it is outlined in that contract. And that's why it's very important during the kickoff meeting and during the question and answer period. If you have any questions on how you're being paid for that, if it's hourly, can you bill monthly, things like that, just be mindful of that to make sure that it's all clear to everybody. Typically, the state pays net 30. If you work for the Great Division of DOA, we usually pay a lot faster than that, but that's what it states in our terms and conditions, is that we pay net 30 from the approval of an invoice. The state does not pay before the goods and services are received. So when if you're selling us a box of pens and by the pens get to their office, they go into e-procurement and they receive, yes, I got those pens. And at that point, it then notifies you that that PO has been received. Therefore, you can invoice. All payments to the vendor are dependent and subject on availability of funds. That is in our North Carolina terms and conditions. Just note that by receipt of a purchase order means that those funds have been encumbered. Therefore, we are moving forward with that process. But there may be pieces when you bid on it, it was a 5-phase project. And we then, through the evaluation of that project, only realized we have enough money for phase 1. So we only awarded phase 1 of that contract. We would have cleared that up and gotten both parties to sign off on the negotiation document, which is that best and final offer BAFO document. And then your purchase order would only have phase 1 because we only had enough money for phase 1. The state does not agree to pay for costs such as interest, late fees, penalties, or attorney fees. That's in our standard terms and conditions. We do not pay those fees. And also note that we are fully state tax, sales tax exempt. So we do not pay any state sales tax. The state does have a tax exempt form on file. If you're getting paid by a P card, a swipe of a P card for something, just know that it cannot have taxes on it. We will not pay state sales tax. The state does have the capability to pay for electronic payments. The vendor should submit a form, and that is the OSC website where you can sign up for electronic funds transfer instead of actually printing out a check and mailing it to you. So on your invoice, just things that should be included on your invoice is, you know that you're sending that invoice to whoever is identified in your contract. And for us at DOA, your bills will need to be sent to the actual division before it's signed off on and then sent to our fiscal office for payment, where the accountants key the invoices and it touches our accounting system and it closes out that PO, and then we pay that invoice. Sometimes that invoice goes directly to a fiscal office. Wherever you need to send that invoice to, make sure during your kickoff meeting that you solidify and get that contact information and just confirm where you're supposed to send that. But it also should be written into your contract. Include the following on your invoice. It should include the description of the services completed. If there are any reporting requirements, make sure you submit those reports with your invoice. It should include the current purchase order. So like I said, if we are in year 3 of this contract, make sure that the purchase order reference on the invoice is for the 3rd year of that contract. It always is helpful to include your contract number so that we know where to associate that. Ensure that your remit to address in EVP is up to date. You can update all the contact information in EVP is on the vendor. If you have trouble logging into EVP, reach out to the help desk. All that information is on the EVP website, which I think Carla, I saw put in there, to EVP to update your registration. Just ensure that your remit to address is correct and that it matches your tax ID on how you are registered. If not, you need to make sure that your tax ID is matching your new address if you have moved. But if that does not match, our accounting system will not allow us to pay you. And so it's been causing some issues when we switched over to this new accounting system. Just be mindful that you check your remit to address, make sure it's correct, and then it matches your vendor tax ID number. Now we're going to get into contract closeout. So you've gone through all of the contracts, you've completed all your deliverables, or maybe not, and you're getting towards the end of your term of the time allowed to complete the contract. So just some closeout activities to think about. Ensure that you have met all the deliverables. Return all of that state-issued equipment and access badges. Close out any access where you were in our systems. Ensure that if there were disputes or issues or corrective actions to be done, that you have completed those. Comply with record retention. So for us, our contract record retention is we keep contract files 5 years after expiration. So you do not have to keep it that long, but if you want to maintain the same in case we needed to come back to something, that's what we suggest, is that you keep your contract record for 5 years after expiration of the contract. Any final acceptance by the project manager is received. So if there were final things that had to happen, make sure that the contract manager or the project manager is signing off on those, and then submit your final invoicing so that they can sign off that as well. If there are additional tasks that need to be done, or if you need additional time to complete the tasks, just know that that contract will have to be amended or extended to allow you time to do that. And potentially that could have money tied to it, potentially not. Maybe you just need more time. If it does have any money tied to it, those amendments take a little bit of time. So make sure you give your contract manager enough time and notice that, hey, this is going to need to be extended. Let's get it through the extension process to ensure that we still have a valid contract to work from. So just be mindful of that. If there are things that need to continue to happen, that we amend the contracts in a timely manner. Any questions there? And I think that that is it.
All right. I do not have any questions in this chat, but you're welcome to raise your hand and get your questions answered. Tricole?
Yeah, so I have 2 questions. So you mentioned something about delivery of product. So not saying it would happen. So let's say you got receipt. Let's say I'm delivering to Hillside High for the cafeteria for some food product. And I got receipt of that product that was delivered. However, the management saying they didn't receive it. How would y'all figure the payment process out? If I have receipt, but they
So
still
they're saying that they didn't get the product?
Yeah, let's say they saying they did not get it.
I mean,
Not saying they will, but people may say they didn't have it, but they do have it. So how would that work if I have receipts of it? I'm just thinking for future reference. That's all.
Okay. I mean, if they say they didn't receive it, I mean, it's on you to make sure that your shipping process was fine and look for it and whatnot and work with that contract manager to find it. If your receipts say that it was deliverable, I would offer that documentation to the contract manager and says, well, on our end, it says that it was delivered. What are our steps? Y'all gonna have to work together to find it. Maybe that receipt has a signature on it and you can start there. I'm not sure, but if once it's received in the system, so let's say that they've received it, but they haven't gone into e-procurement and hit the little receive button, you may want to reach out to them and say, hey, I have confirmation that you've already received. Can you receive it in the system so that I can invoice you? So I think you got 2 different things there.
Okay, I appreciate that one. And the last question for now. So you was mentioning about the sales tax. You said you do different departments do sales tax, because I had did a bid last month on an item for delivery, for shipping, and they told me to add the sales tax. So it depends on the department itself.
I'm pretty sure that that's across the board, that the state is tax exempt. North Carolina sales tax exempt. Now we do pay like occupancy tax at hotels, we do pay food and beverage tax, but as far as sales tax, we are sales tax exempt. And as far as I know DOA is, and we have our own sales tax exempt form. I assume that that is across the board.
Okay, so Durham itself is not.
I'm not sure that when it comes to municipalities,
It's different.
they may have different rules than state agencies. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I appreciate for the clarity.
Mm-hmm. So when I speak to that, and we talk about state agencies, I'm talking about the cabinet agencies such as DPS, DHHS, Department of Revenue. Those different state agencies fall under the same rules as DOA does. Then there are some other agencies such as like Wildlife, State Board of Elections, things like that also fall under state agency rules. Then there's the municipalities and the universities and the community college that follow some of the same rules, but then have their own set of payment process. So everything we went through today, as far as the use of e-procurement, is all specific to state agencies. However, a lot of those other entities also use these same processes and procedures throughout.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions? If no more questions, Meredith, thank you so much. Oh, I see a hand.
Andrew Lindsay. Yep.
Let me unmute. Can you hear me now?
Ian.
Yeah.
Hi, Meredith. I want to go over that subcontractor and prime contractor situation again to make sure that I'm clear, because when you got two companies that are trying to work together, one's going to be the prime, the other one's going to be a sub. Do they both come to the table at the same time when you're doing your opening?
That's probably a good idea to bring them to that kickoff meeting if there are tasks that they are completing under the contracts. Then yeah, I would definitely bring them to the table when you have that kickoff meeting.
Mm-hmm.
What needs to be very clear to you guys as a subcontractor or as a prime is that the state is only contracting with the prime. Whoever sends in, executes that signature authority block on the submittal of the proposal. So if you have subcontractors that are included to complete the task, you may include that in your technical approach that, yeah, this person is going to do, this company is going to do the concrete piece of this walkway, right? And we're going to actually do the labor piece, whatever it is. The contract is only with the labor company that's actually laying down the pavers. And so if there's a problem with the concrete, we're not going after the subcontractor concrete people. We're coming back to the people that signed the contract that we are under contract with. So it behooves a subcontractor and the prime to potentially, outside of when you're bidding, y'all write your own agreement between your two parties so that if there is an issue, you have a leg to stand on to go after your subcontractor. We are not paying your subcontractor directly. We're only paying the prime. So then it's the prime's responsibility to manage the relationship and the money and everything else between the two vendors. The state does not get involved in that relationship, is what I should say.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And it's just a good idea to cover both parties to write an agreement anytime that you're going into business with two different agencies. To have an agreement between the two of you is never a bad idea.
Oh, yes. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah.
Johnny?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having this very much needed informational. I am asking a question basically along the same lines. I do promotional products, screen printing, and embroidery. Do I need to have a contract? I outsource all of my decoration. Do I need to have a contract with them as
I
well?
would suggest it. It's not a requirement, but I would suggest it just to cover you. So if there was a reason why you didn't meet a deadline and it's on your subcontractor, if your agreement had some kind of penalties outlined, that might be
Mhm.
helpful for you to at least be able to get money from them for not meeting a deadline, because you potentially could lose out on. I'm just saying that it's always a good idea that if you are counting on a different vendor to do any of the work under a contract you have with the state, it's in your best interest to have that agreement between your two vendors.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A question just popped in the chat. What are the requirements for renting state-owned equipment?
On what it's for and a particular project, I would say. So when you're saying renting state-owned equipment, if there was, I'm trying to think of where we have state-owned equipment. I don't think we have a process for renting state-owned equipment like on an as-needed basis. That doesn't exist. But if you're renting state equipment during a project and you're held liable for using a forklift that we have, but you have your people up on a forklift, in our state terms and conditions, there's stuff that you have to handle, workman's comp cases, you have to handle things like that. So that could be a question based on the actual project that you bring up. What are those requirements for that particular project? Because it could be very different based on the project, I would say. And then what about buying equipment? So like I said, we have state and federal surplus property that manages the auctioning and the selling of all the state's used equipment. So you might want to, you can go onto DOA's website, onto state, you can simply Google state surplus property and see where their warehouse is. They do have online auctions where they auction stuff for the universities and community colleges out in different areas of North Carolina. But it's a great place to find used equipment to complete your own, to add to your business. So check that out, and we're always glad to to comment for them to get more business. That does help relieve and relieve some of the taxpayer dollars when we get revenue on services like that.